that's really important to get outside of the bubble that you're in and really spend time learning from other either industries or other types of businesses.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook, presented by Details Interactive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 84, and today's guest is Maryssa Miller. Maryssa has experienced a number of different verticals in her career. She's worked in travel, apparel, gifts, and now in a new vertical for her, hospitality. She's been on both sides of the table, working on both the brand and the provider side. We've known each other through LinkedIn only for a long time, that first connection happening when she was at JetBlue, and I was likely offering some thoughts on how the site could be enhanced. She has a great story that I'm sure you're going to enjoy. Before we get started, a quick thank you, as always, to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by Maryssa Miller. Maryssa is currently the Chief Product Officer at Mint House, a new upscale short-term rental startup that has over 25 properties in 16 markets. There, she oversees the product, brand, marketing, and design teams, focusing on building from scratch a new model of flexible living that is elevated, anticipated, and curated for their guests. Prior to Mint House, Maryssa was the head of digital and customer products at JetBlue Airways Corp., where she was responsible for all customer-facing digital products within the multi-billion-dollar global airline. She had been at JetBlue for 10 years, previously serving as head of digital commerce within the commercial division. She has over 25 years of digital experience working for other well-known brands such as Lacoste, 1-800-Flowers, and Scholastic. Maryssa, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
One of the things we like to do on the show is kind of get the first story from the guest. And you'd be surprised, I've done over 80 shows, and so often when I talk to folks, there's something in their background that kind of gave some foreshadowing into what they ultimately have done in their career. Is there anything like that in your past, Maryssa?
Oh, that's great. I can't believe you've done 80 shows. That's awesome. Sure. I mean, my mother was very entrepreneurial. She actually founded and ran an adult education program for about over 20 years in our school district, and really, started that from scratch all on her own. So not sort of the traditional entrepreneur that you think about today with big startups, but it was a startup, and really did that and grew that from scratch and was well known in the community for that. And my father was an actual rocket scientist. He worked for NASA and Grumman, and turned chief information officer, where he retired ultimately from that career. And so I think, definitely their backgrounds rubbed off on me, a lot. I also was a very early reader. My mom used to say that I could read the New York Times when I was 3 years old, and I always thought it was an exaggeration until I saw my own daughter read her first words when she was 2.5. So I think that just that early love of reading and language and really understanding the power of words and content and how that can influence behavior and, the love of stories. And so that probably led me into being really interested in the marketing world. Telling stories and, really communicating through digital is extremely important. And I've always had a love of that.
That's a good story. And Dad being a rocket scientist, that must have been all kinds of jokes with friends.
Yes, of course. Yeah, very analytical. So I think I get that analytical background from him as well.
Okay. One of the things that's, so interesting about your background is lots of disparate brands and verticals, much more so than I probably have seen in most of the guests that I've chatted with. Some, time with, flowers and gifts, and then books and apparel. You spent some time on the agency side and airline, and now what you're doing, in hospitality. So very different. How easy or difficult, would you say that these transitions have been, to make?
They're always a little challenging at the beginning, but at the end of the day, I think that digital skills are extremely transferable. I mean, they're like financial skills or, human resources. It's something that you really can apply to any industry. And I actually think it's short-sighted for companies to think that you need to come from one background, because you also add a whole new perspective from coming from a different background. For example, when I came to JetBlue and not having any travel or airline, industry experience specifically, I had a retailing background that really helped with driving e-commerce and bringing that type of thinking to the organization. So, I really do think that folks that are in digital definitely can jump from industry to industry. Some companies are not as open to that, but the learning curve happens over the course of the first 6 months, perhaps, of being in a new company, as it would anyway, when you have to learn, the ins and outs of a new organization. But at the end of the day, I absolutely think that you can make huge impacts by going across different industries.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel 1,000% like you, especially if you're the guy that is, has spent most of your life and career in, let's say, women's apparel, where I've spent a lot of time.
Mhm.
Each time that I've gone to talk to people, let's say in the beauty space, and I'm going to cast a wide net here, but the beauty industry for me has seemingly been the one that is the least open to bringing people in unless they have had beauty experience, which is why when I meet people like you, so when you were interviewing for these, various roles, did it come up in the conversations? Geez, you don't have airline experience.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember going all the way back to Lacoste, where they were saying, but you don't have luxury experience, you don't have this. I mean, many times I had that thrown back at me, that I didn't have that experience, but I was always able to explain, you don't have e-commerce experience. I do. So if you want that to bring to your organization, I launched e-commerce from scratch for Lacoste. And no one in the organization at the time had any e-commerce experience at all. So why would it really matter if I had luxury experience? At the time, there wasn't a lot of people in the industry that had luxury e-commerce experience. So, I really do think that finding a way to get past those naysayers and convincing them that, you really would be the person that they would need to really help them get to the next level in that area.
So just quickly run us through Scholastic, 800 Flowers. Just give the listeners some perspective of the breadth.
Yeah, I started my career really at 1-800-Flowers, more in the traditional marketing side, which I had gone, and for my undergraduate was in business and marketing. And, after a while thinking that traditional retail wasn't exactly my passion, but I became really interested in the e-commerce space, actually working on a store locator. So as part of my job in retail, I was working with that team and just was so fascinated by what they were doing, and really loved the team and the vision. And I really felt like something was there. This is really, not to date myself, but this was the original e-commerce boom before the bust. And then once I really got my hands in there, I basically begged them for a position in the team because I was so interested in it. And that's what really let my digital career take off. I started doing more content development, my first role at 1-800-Flowers, and then I moved into business analysis. And then from there, I moved on to, when I got to Scholastic, I was running their first direct-to-consumer store. I've always been very passionate about the customer side of things, and being really close to the customer, understanding customer needs and behavior. And I think that's really been also a thread that's gone throughout my career. And from there, I had gotten my master's degree during the time I was at Scholastic, and then jumped to what I think was a big step change in my career, leading the first e-commerce store for Lacoste and growing that to bigger than our biggest flagship, and then also helping them to launch into Europe. And through that experience, really, really honed my digital e-commerce skills.
So a couple of threads I want to pick up on there. You talk about your master's. You also mentioned something about your mom in a school district. So I caught that at the beginning. So I'm guessing education played an important part of your upbringing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's been really invaluable to me, even going and getting my master's degree, because it gave me the confidence and a different way of thinking that I would have had if I hadn't gotten that. It also led to becoming an adjunct professor at NYU for several years, which was really fun, teaching e-commerce marketing. But, at the time, it really did become an advantage in my resume. Many people remarked on, wow, you have that master's from NYU. I don't think it would matter as much today, given the rest of my career, but at the time, it really was a competitive advantage.
It's interesting because as I was prepping for the show, just happened to see an article on LinkedIn, and it was all about, whether or not there's value in these advanced degrees, because, in many cases, there's a big opportunity cost of people giving up jobs. If they're not able to do it at night, there's an opportunity cost of giving up a job and a compensation that you have. And then, oh, by the way, paying the tuition for your education. But it seems like it's played out well for you.
Yes, but I would also say I really did do that cost analysis myself. And I was working at Scholastic and stayed there longer because they were helping to pay for my education, and they paid for the majority of my master's. So I do think it's a cost benefit analysis. And I probably wouldn't have dropped out of the workforce to pursue the master's. But since I was able to do it at the same time, it was definitely worth it.
Thriving brands today have one thing in common. They make it a priority to understand their customers. Amperity uses AI to unify customer data and help businesses know exactly who their customers are and what they care about. Find new customers, grow loyalty, get better return on ad spend, and manage privacy compliance. An accurate, unified customer data foundation connected with the teams and tools that need it makes everything you do with customer data work better. Build your strategy on Amperity, the platform for customer data. Regardless of vertical or role, one of the other things that kind of covers all of these brands is business analysis, and you mentioned that, and KPIs. As a digital commerce person, what are some of those KPIs that maybe are not as well followed? Like traffic and conversion. Is there anything out there that you like to look at that might be a little bit on the edge?
Yeah, well, I mean, specifically in the travel industry, one of the things that we've looked at both at JetBlue and at House is direct share. And that's such a critical component because it's how many people are converting directly from your URL versus going to an OTA where you're paying commission, and tracking that and trying to shift the behavior more to the direct side. But most importantly, and I think even going back to retail KPIs, what really matters is when you drill down into those KPIs. It's not just the KPIs themselves, that's just the indicator to help you figure out where to look further, but it's not the end of the story. And so digging into that to see what may have changed to shift those KPIs, and you'll probably see a lot of things that are hiding in those numbers that is really the answer to either a problem or a trend or just being able to capitalize on changes. I can think of one example going back to JetBlue when our direct share shifted and our e-commerce was much lower as a share. And, people were saying, what's going on? Is there something wrong with e-commerce? Well, it turned out that Expedia started selling one-way tickets for the first time for JetBlue tickets. And so that dramatically increased their share because previous to that, you had to buy a round trip. So I think knowing what those fundamental changes are can really help you ascertain whether there's some problem on e-commerce we need to look at versus this is just a trend going on in the industry and can help shift strategy accordingly.
So it seems like, Maryssa, you're talking about Expedia and direct traffic to the JetBlue site. For me in the apparel space, it's kind of like if you're a brand and you're selling to another retailer as a wholesaler, you're essentially competing with that other retailer for traffic to sell your goods. Is that kind of how you thought about it at the airline?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to my Lacoste days, it was very similar. So looking at the trends with wholesale and seeing why that may have shifted. Maybe we started discounting at a different rate than we used to. So absolutely monitoring those shifts of share can apply to really any industry that has multiple distribution channels.
Okay, got it. And, for folks that listen to my show, they've probably heard me talk about the dark side. And the dark side is the provider side, considering, I've been a brand guy, for my entire career. You made a leap to a business called Create the Group. Tell us about that.
Sure. So Create the Group was a digital agency. They've had since been acquired and don't exist in the same form anymore. But it was a great experience. I always wanted to try working at an agency. In a lot of ways, it is the dark side. But what I found at the end of the day is that I personally am more of an operator and I like to see things through. I did love the challenge of working on a lot of different brands and the variety. I helped launch Marc Jacobs and Donna Karan and a huge overhaul of David Yurman. So it was a lot of fun. And I think I learned so much even in the year and a half that I was there that at the end of the day, it made me a much more powerful leader of agencies. And now I know what really makes agencies tick and how to partner with them to get the best work. And that's such a critical component of any type of leadership role, in digital. And hopefully they would say that it made me a better client, although I guess the jury would be out there.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because, oftentimes I believe, in negotiations, in order for you to be successful in a negotiation, you really need to know the other party that you're negotiating with and their economics and how they think through, what they can live with. And for those, people in our space that have been on the other side, the agency side, it seems like it's really helpful when you come back onto the brand.
Absolutely. I think it was tremendously helpful.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I think too many agencies don't have enough of, and that's people that have actually sat in the seat of the people they're trying to sell to.
It's true. I mean, I think you're touching on a common theme of when we talked about being industry agnostic or being agency driven, a lot of times you're speaking to yourself, and not understanding the other parties and or the other industries. And I think that that's really important to get outside of the bubble that you're in and really spend time learning from other either industries or other types of businesses.
Yeah, going back to JetBlue, because you were there for so long and because so much changed in digital for airlines during that time, are there one or two things that you're most proud of while you were there?
Yeah, absolutely. And JetBlue was such a fun ride and, had the most incredible, passionate team who did really, really big things. So I think if I think back on the top things, and there are so many, but launching the self-service lobby at JFK, I'm still really proud when we go in there. You can see the transformation. It used to be just this really crowded, super stressful place where, sometimes during holidays there were lines out the door and people yelling and, not able to get to their bag drop line to, a really peaceful place a lot of times. And we created this entire transformation of the lobby, won numerous awards for that in terms of the design of the lobby. And it was a huge project that really brought together so many parts of the team at JetBlue. And, it was a priority and we made it happen, which was really terrific. And then I think the other big accomplishment was Digital 2020. It was our digital transformation program that I launched with my team starting in 2017. It was, a 3-year plan. 2020 seemed so far in the future, but it was so named because it was also 2020 vision. And that was a top to bottom transformation of all of our digital products. And, I still feel incredibly proud of the work that the team did, and still see that live on the site in the e-commerce engine today. So yeah, both of those things, among many others, where we won several awards over my time there, like Webby Awards, a Clio, GD Power, and just an amazing inspirational team that did just tremendous work.
Good stuff. And I do remember, when you and I first connected through LinkedIn, it was definitely around an experience that I had trying to book a ticket online, but it was very early. So we'll cut you some slack on that. But, clearly you guys did an amazing job in building that out during your tenure. So congratulations for that. But not everything goes according to plan. And either, at JetBlue or someplace else along your career, was there a disappointment or something that, didn't go the way you wanted to, but you learned a lot from it?
I've made mistakes like anybody else. Our teams made mistakes. And I think the most important thing is just trying to figure out why that happened, and what you can do differently next time. I think as a whole, a lot of us made mistakes during the pandemic because we were all working in an unprecedented situation without a playbook or a lot of, standard things that you could turn to figure out what was going to happen next. And so some of those decisions made, I think, unfortunately, still paying for them today. You've seen a lot of breakdown in the travel agency because so many people in the travel world, sorry, not travel agency, in the travel world, because the demand came roaring back. And that just wasn't what anyone expected at the time when, the planes were empty and the hotels were empty. But what I think the lesson in all of that is not just trying to make a plan of what to do next and saying like, okay, sales are down, how do we react to that? You also have to take the alternative point of view. What happens if we're wrong? And I think asking that question every time of, we think this is the way things are going, but what if it's the complete opposite, and making a secondary plan for that as well. I think that's something that I would do differently over the course of my career.
Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, they've helped 13 of their customers get acquired, with one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd recently. Plus, they were ranked as the 12th fastest growing agency in the world by Adweek. The Mint House. Tell me about that. What is the Mint House?
So Mint House is a really exciting flexible living model that was founded back in 2017, when our founder Will Lucas was looking for alternatives to his business travel and not wanting to stay in that standard box hotel room where you didn't have a space to work or cook or really feel comfortable living. And so Mint House was formed, and you could think of Mint House sort of in between your traditional Airbnb, but with the comforts and safety and security of a hotel. So you'll get that full home apartment living that's incredibly comfortable. Our units all have some form of a kitchen. Some of them have full washer dryers. They may have multiple bedrooms, but just really a wonderful expanded space for you to accommodate all types of different flexible sleeping needs, whether you're traveling with extended family or you're staying even by yourself, but just need a separate place to work and stay. So it's also great because it's a short-term rental model, and you don't need to sign that traditional 12-month lease. You could get something as small as one night or even several months. And so we have just so many different types of customers using our product that maybe they need a place to downsize, or they're staying in town but they don't want to stay in that traditional hotel. But yeah, it's been a really exciting space. I think we're while a lot of the traditional hotel brands are actually getting into this space and having more short-term rentals, we are really the only one that's more upscale. And there's a lot more in the sort of down market space. Even probably some of the brands that you've known about have stayed at previously, but we're really trying to do things in that elevated way, and very highly functional, and something that's serving the needs of all of our guests.
So just as, and this is more curious than even for the show, but so for Mint House, for, I was checking out property in New York. Do you own those properties or are you subletting them from the owners?
Yeah, we have a couple of different models. So we don't own any of our properties. So it's very asset light, which is, obviously a great investment for us. So in some cases, we do have more traditional leases, but in a lot of cases, we're also the manage operator. So we come in and operate the space a lot of times in multifamily, multi-use buildings. In some cases, we have the full building, like in St. Petersburg, we recently opened up a full building, but in other cases, like at 70 Pine in New York, we have several floors. Although you will still feel like it's our own private space, a separate entrance. We have a separate lobby experience. So it's a very feeling like a very private space. But we do technically share that building with traditional residents who come in through a different entrance and have standard apartments in that building.
Every business has got its marketing challenges. You've got to get the message out. Or is it more difficult to work in a company where it's not only where you're trying to get the brand out, but the business model is new, so maybe it takes a little bit more explanation?
100%. I think, refining our message has been an ongoing challenge, and being able to explain it in, the way that I just described to you, but in a much shorter, a shorter space, especially if you have advertising or you have paid search or performance marketing or, through social and things like that. So that is absolutely a challenge because it is something that does require some explanation because people aren't used to it. It's also something that in some cases faces regulatory environments. I mean, in some ways, we've been really benefiting from the Airbnb changes that have happened in Manhattan, because now short-term rentals have to be registered and, there's a approval process and all of that, whereas we have a hotel license, which is terrific. But it's really hard to explain that to people. And then I think secondarily, you don't have big budgets in a startup. In fact, much smaller budgets than I've been used to in my career. So, trying to figure out how to still make that investment in the most powerful way with, the highest ROI, so that you could get the message across, but still adhere to those, relatively small budgets.
Yeah. Well, this is a marketing podcast, so let's hit on that a bit. How are you getting the message out to the consumer?
We do a lot of performance marketing. When people are searching for travel, I knew this, going back to my JetBlue days, people really do start their search a lot of times on, traditional search engines. And so really heavily investing in performance marketing, investing in organic marketing as well. And then we do supplement that with a lot of social. We do some social advertising. We try to create social content or really capitalize on the organic content that's being created, and some of our spaces just really lend themselves naturally to that, which is great. People love to say that they're staying at Mint House and show that look how huge this apartment is and what space they have for instead of a traditional hotel room. So really capitalizing on that. We also capitalize on traditional public relations. So, we work really hard on trying to amplify that message. And we've been really lucky to land some really great pieces there. But yeah, it's an ongoing challenge with small budgets. We are not nearly at a point where we can invest in much more mass market media. So it's really about being very scrappy and trying to take on all the opportunities that sometimes come our way, and then other times, really trying to aggressively go after them, especially in the local markets where we open up new properties.
I hadn't been on the site previously, but I spent some time on it. It's very well done. It is definitely plays upscale. So congratulations on the work that you've done. I don't know if I missed it. Were there reviews on the site of people that have spent time at these properties?
No, that was a great point. We did a redesign that I had led in spring of this year, and we did do an overhaul of our e-commerce site. I definitely thought that was a huge opportunity for us because we were missing a lot of content and a lot of things to better explain our story. So it's definitely paid off. And as I always said, like, the last transaction is not where you want to lose somebody. You spent all this money getting people to your site. You want to make sure that they convert. We do have reviews, obviously, across all the other channels. We look at the customer reviews all the time that come into our Google profile, that come into the OTAs and TripAdvisor and all the standard ones, so that we can react to those and understand what's going on in each property. But at the time we launched the site, we weren't really able to take on that huge lift of incorporating customer reviews directly into our site, but certainly something we would think about in the future.
I love one of the other capabilities that you have where you're offering for sale some of the products that a guest would experience at a property. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that is just also a really tremendous opportunity because inspiration is so important in any kind of e-commerce and transaction. And people are inspired in so many different places. It's not just going to a traditional store, it's through media, it's through your physical environment. And this concept of native retail, I think, is really important. I will say it's not a huge piece of our business. It's something that, not everybody's going to want to buy that $1,000 bed, but we do sell it. We actually do sell it, which is great. So it's additional revenue for us. And at the end of the day, I think it's really showing the tremendous design talent we have and showcasing us as tastemakers, because we're always looking at the best furniture and design and functionality. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept, and it's definitely incorporating my retail background there. But anytime that people are inspired and having such a great experience at our property, we would love for them to be able to take that home with them.
Yeah, that's great. I love the concept, and we'll see if there's an opportunity for me to use it at some point. You've had throughout your career seemingly opportunities to have many employees working underneath you, with you. What's your guidance to the listener for dealing with an employee perhaps that's not meeting your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, over a course of a 25-year career, that has happened. I think I've been very, very lucky to have really, really high performing teams. And so that hasn't happened that often, but it does happen. I've had to fire and lay off people through the course of my career. But I think the number one thing is really giving a lot of chances and clarifying expectations. I found sometimes when I inherit somebody from another team, and people would say to me that, aside from things being egregious, when things are egregious, obviously that is not the right employee. But when things aren't, and people would sometimes say this person wasn't the best for X reason or Y reason, oftentimes I would find that they just really didn't have the right direction. And so spending a lot of time with them and making sure they're clear on the direction and what the expectations are, and sometimes resetting and being open about that process has really helped. And a lot of times really turned people around and had them become, high performing people on the team. So, I think it's a matter as a leader of taking that responsibility first and understanding why that's happening before you jump to the conclusion that it's just about the other person.
That's great advice. Couldn't agree anymore. That's great. Thank you. We are at the end of our show. I do a 2-minute drill at the end here. 7 questions, 1-word answer. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. A brand that you admire or that inspires you.
Apple.
A favorite app on your phone.
Oh gosh.
How is it not JetBlue?
It's not JetBlue. Well, that's true. I should say Mint House. I'll say Mint House.
Okay. The last website other than Amazon that you shopped from.
Hannah Anderson.
Something that you're not good at but wish that you were.
Singing.
A charitable organization that you're passionate about.
The St. Nicholas Project.
If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Mind reading.
And other than your family, what's your most prized possession?
My home.
Great. Maryssa, where can people reach out to you on social media should they have an interest in doing so?
Happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you spending the time this morning with me. It's nice to actually have seen you face to face and chatted with you. We've been connected for a very long time. Really enjoyed it, and I have enjoyed the work that you've done throughout your career.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Maryssa Miller for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, when you're looking to make a hire, especially in digital commerce, the industry or vertical that someone has worked in should be less important than their skills. Digital skills are very transferable. Just because you've never worked in beauty doesn't mean that you cannot bring new and insightful thinking to that business. Open your perspective to the fact that learning from people outside of your vertical can be helpful. And number 2, should you get a graduate degree? That's, of course, a very personal decision, but in so many cases, that added degree helps you to learn different ways of thinking. Sure, you gain technical expertise, but the challenge to think outside of the box, more analytically perhaps, is one reason for getting that added degree. It's not for everyone, but if you have an opportunity to have your employer pay for it, you should consider whether down the road your skills will be more appealing for potential employers. And number 3, I speak about the dark side, the provider side, but it's so important to understand both sides of any business or negotiation. If you want something from someone, the best way to get it is to understand what helps them make their decisions, understand their economics, understand their thought process, and what they think it takes to be a winner. It'll help you to craft an effective strategy. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.